Today I get to review something that's of great personal interest to me as far as my own main system is concerned, potentially the next evolutionary step, taking performance to another level. But this is my channel. I always get to choose things that are of interest to me. But that might be for different reasons. It might be something unusual about the way it's engineered, like the Burson Timekeeper 3i with its max current power supply and its discrete proprietary op amps that draws me in and makes me think, I wonder what they've done there. Or it could be something off the beaten track, a boutique hi-fi brand like Ophidian, whose Mambo 2 speakers I reviewed. Come to think of it, they're pretty unique as well, with their hybrid transmission line Aeroflex bass loading system. It may be a product that's been raved about by the blown away brigade, and I want to know what the fuss is about. Sometimes those products live up to those high expectations, sometimes they don't, but more often than not, they offer very good performance for the right kind of individual. Today's a little bit different in the sense that if I didn't have a YouTube channel and I wasn't reviewing hi-fi equipment, the Auralic Aries G1.1 streaming transport is the exact kind of device that I'd be looking to insert in my main system to see if I could take performance to the next level. Now, to make sense of that, let me give you some context. If I ever get to try the current version of my Product Response 1 SEs, the DB1s, I'll be jumping up and down to let you know if they sound worse, as good or better. All I can say for now is, of all the sub £3,000 speakers I've tried, nothing sounded as good as these old Proacs. Well, that's not entirely true. The ATC SCM19s are more revealing and have less coloration, but they require great big power amplifiers to shine and aren't the best speaker for late night quiet listening. So even there's relative strengths and weaknesses. Now, I'm generally surprised that I'm saying this, but there is another amplifier that I've reviewed below £5,000 or that I can think of that will make me want to ditch my Exposure 21 Pre and 18 Super monoblocks. Looking at the current range, the modern day equivalent is likely to be the recently released Exposure 3510 preamplifier and matching monoblocks, yours for around £4,500. Now, those are supposed to be coming in for review soon, so watch this space. My digital front end has changed. The Chord Mojo was always a stopgap when I ditched my Exposure CD player until I could find a DAC that was more suitable at a price that I could afford. Here's a bit of a scoop for you. The Denefritz Venus 2 that I recently reviewed, well, that's not going back. I was that impressed with it that I decided to keep it, my most recent acquisition from Alvin at Vinshine Audio. Feeding that will be my Auralic Aries Mini, which when it was on sale may have only retailed for £450, but its performance was significantly enhanced by adding an MCRU linear power supply for £300. When it was available, that Auralic Aries Mini was arguably one of the best streamers on the market sub £1,000. With the addition of the MCRU power supply, that takes things to an entirely different level. Now, I don't think Auralic are going to do this for a moment, but just humour me. If they were to reintroduce the Mini, I don't think it'd sell for anything like £450. That's because I know the reasons why it was discontinued. It was there to do a job, to broaden the appeal of the brand, introduce more people to it. And once that had been done, it made no sense for them to have a streamer at that price. So it's no slam dunk for this Aries G1.1. Yes, it has fancy casework, a fancy display, and a linear power supply built in. But in order to justify its price, it needs to offer better performance as well. The Auralic Aries G1.1 streaming transport is a solidly built device with nice thick aluminium plates. The addition of an anodized silver base plate is the most obvious feature to distinguish it from the outgoing G1 model. The added mass of the base improves damping of vibrations. It's trickled down from the more expensive G2 series, but there the units are finished in all black. Other changes from the G1 are that it now supports AirPlay 2. It can also be fitted internally with an optional solid-state 2TB drive for an additional £400. That seems very good value to turn this device into a music server for locally stored music files, especially when you consider the cost of these types of devices from competitors such as Melco and Inuos, or you can fit your own USB drive externally. The Aries G1.1 can now stream up to PCM 384 kHz 32-bit and DSD512 over a home Wi-Fi network. The Tesla G2 processing engine is lifted straight out of the G2, supporting twice the system memory at 2 GB and data storage at 6 GB, as well as an impressive 1 GB cache memory. These changes are reported to make it 50% faster than the older model. All in all, what may appear to be a minor facelift is a significant revision. Like my Auralic Aries Mini, the Aries G1.1 is controlled using the Lightning DS app. It may not be as slick shifting through menus as the Bluesound app, but it sounds great, and I noticed that the lag that I usually experience when selecting tracks on my Mini was reduced with the G1.1, presumably due to the increased processing power. Before I move on, the Lightning DS app is supported on Apple iOS devices only. Android and Windows-based users are left disappointed. Auralic is a relatively small company, and constantly keeping on top of platform changes is labour-intensive. Auralic's CEO's view is that he'd rather do a proper job of managing one operating system than a poorer job of many. The Aries G1.1 supports the streaming services you'd expect: Spotify, Tidal, Qobuz, Amazon, and many others besides. I already mentioned AirPlay 2, but other streaming platforms are supported, such as Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, Bluetooth, and it can act as a Roon endpoint. Auralic also sell a similar device called the Altair, which retails for exactly the same price as the Aries G1.1. But that has a DAC section built in and all the connections associated with it. And believe it or not, both devices have exactly the same streaming board. So what the hell's going on there? Surely you can't remove a DAC section from a device and sell it for the same price. Well, it's never as simple as that, is it? The Altair has a more basic power supply. Take a look at that black donut in the corner. That's the transformer. In comparison, the Aries 1.1 has a more sophisticated power supply with twin transformers, shielded by green casework, similar to that of its £4,500 big brother. I'm not clear if the Aries 1.1 has a dual mono power supply. That's where you have one power supply looking after the left channel and a completely separate one looking after the right channel. That's what makes logical sense. But it's also possible that you could have different sections of the board powered by different power supplies. So if I find out about that, I'll pin a notification below this video. Even if both devices were the same, the Altair and the Aries, and the only difference was that one had a DAC section removed. If I had a good quality DAC, it's the streaming transport that I would go for, because by removing the DAC section, you get an improvement in sound quality. All that power supply has to do is worry about powering that streaming board, and also that sensitive electronics on that streaming board aren't interfered by with the circuitry of the DAC. You don't have to spend fortunes to discover these kind of differences. Just hook up a £200 DAC with a digital volume control to a £400 amplifier like the IOTA VX SA3. Because the DAC has a volume control, you can also do an A-B comparison with the matching power amplifier, the PA3, that retails for £300. You'll find that the PA3 sounds just a little bit better, despite the fact that both devices have identical amplifier sections, and that's because the PA3 doesn't have the preamplifier section of the SA3. And it's a similar scenario here. By removing the DAC section from the streamer, you'd expect an uplift in sonic performance. Earlier in this video I spoke a little bit about my reference setup, then for its Venus 2 feeding my exposure pre-monoblocks, powering my Proax, and most of my listening was done using that particular setup. I also did quite a bit of listening with the Denafrips Pontus 2 because I wanted to know what improvement in sound I'd get by upgrading my streamer as opposed to upgrading the DAC. And I could literally cut and paste my comments from the Denafrips Venus 2 review here. The Auralic Aries G1.1 did almost identical things in terms of improving sound quality. Let's talk about what it didn't do. It didn't change the tonal balance. So whatever coloration, or more appropriately in this case, lack of coloration, my Auralic Aries Mini and MCRU power supply were imparting on my system, that remained the same. There was nothing changed about the flavour of the sound. Also, it didn't change the sense of dynamics. That's the difference between the quiet and the loud passages, even though there was a noticeable improvement in bass definition, grip and control. That all tightened up quite nicely. Well, what does it do? Fundamentally, there's an improvement in three key areas: the sense of scale, clarity and focus. Scale with regards to the soundstage width and depth, both noticeably improved. And I suppose the most obvious trait when it comes to clarity is in the transient attack, whether it's the plucking of strings, the striking of keys or percussive instruments. There's just much more palpability, the sense that you've got a real instrument in your room. With regards to focus, well, I'm talking about instrument separation here and the placement of instruments within the soundstage, what us audiophiles like to refer to as imaging. Take the Pontus 2 out and insert the Venus 2 in its place and you get more of the same right across the board. But now you're really cooking. I could go through my audiophile checklist, but I think you'll pretty much guess what I'm going to say. So let me put things this way in order to give you a sense of what this Aries G1.1 is imparting into my system. Yes, things are wider, deeper, cleaner, more separated, as well as more defined within that space. I'm not only hearing the reverb at the end of the note, but very clearly in the middle as well. So well are the textures defined. I suppose all of that adds up to a greater sense of dimensionality. I suppose that's the word that I choose to use. A sense of something realistic and physical in your space. I've been in this house for 8 years and doing this channel for 3 years. In that time, a lot of equipment has passed, and this is the best sound that I've heard in this place. I've already spoken quite a bit about my reference system, but hooking up £2,500 worth of streaming transport to £3 worth of DAC, feeding into the best part of £5,000 worth of amplifiers, driving the best part of £3,000 worth of speakers, makes quite a bit of sense. What if your system isn't quite at that level? The Hegel H190 is a very good all-in-one integrated amplifier, just north of £3,000. The internal DAC is competitive with those standalone units in the sub £1,000 category, and the amplifier itself has a clean and neutral presentation. Partner that with the excellent sounding Amphion Argon 1s and you have a great sounding system for the money. I have no doubt in my mind about that. As good as that system is, would I be looking to put £2,500 worth of streaming transport at the front end? And the answer would be no. The speakers and the internal DAC aren't quite capable enough to reveal the nuanced information that I've been talking about. Substitute the internal DAC for something like a Denafruit's Pontus and the speakers for something at a similar level to my Proax, and that's the minimum standard where the Aries G1.1 starts to make sense. Once you've connected your Aries G1.1 Mini to your network either wirelessly or using the Ethernet LAN port, you'll need to download the Lightning DS app on your iPhone or iPad. As I said, no Android or Windows support here. Mostly, I think functions will be accessed through the app. There's quite a lot you can access from the buttons on the front as well. Press the menu button and you can display what's currently playing in the queue to be played and browse through your library. You can also alter some of the system settings. I won't access that menu as it will display my IP address for the world to see, but you can change some of the display settings such as the idle status and screen brightness. The streamer menu allows you to change things like the volume settings and the delay time, as some DACs need extra time to lock onto an input. You can also enable and disable various streaming platforms as well as change the format of your data from streaming services. The processor menu is where you can access DSP functionality. You're not only able to select from various resample rates, but when the resampler is enabled, choose between 4 digital filters. The Aries G1.1 also has a 16-band parametric EQ to adjust the sound to your listening environment, as well as speaker placement compensation to adjust the gain and for distance. The Auralic Aries G1.1 is a substantially built device with a nice display and a user app that's more than up to the task, but it's the sound quality that's the star of the show here. For those of you who've already got a DAC, an amplifier and a pair of speakers priced individually somewhere between £2,000 and £5,000, and you're using one of those sub £1,000 all-in-one streamers, you know, the type you get with the DAC built in, but I'd be flabbergasted if that isn't the bottleneck in your system. And you should be checking out the Auralic Aries G1.1 streaming transport. It may well be the best way of spending £2,500 to enhance the performance of your system. This is an excellent all-round product, and I find nothing to fault here. The Auralic Aries G1.1 gets an outstanding from this channel. This hobby can throw up some surprises, although I can't say I was surprised by the performance of the Aries G1.1. My bubble of ignorance was well and truly burst when I upgraded the power supply on my Auralic Aries Mini. Boy, did that improvement in performance come as a bit of a revelation. And that got me thinking, what have been the biggest surprises along your journey? I'd love to hear about that in the comments section. All that remains for me to say is if you like this video, you like what I'm doing with this channel, you want to see it grow, and you haven't done so already, please do all that social media stuff. Check me out on Patreon for consultancy services, bonus content, join the ABA club where we have video chats periodically. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.